Welcome to Aero Gaming, I'm Rush, and this is a bit of a look at the PMDG DC-6. There's been quite a bit of stuff going on online, and I really don't want to get too involved in all of the disparaging comments that are out there. We're going to have a good look at the aircraft. We're going to talk about the good things about the aircraft and the flaws of the aircraft. We're going to try and quantify the actual flaws because there are some. It's not unknown that there are some problems with the aircraft. But we also don't want to take too much away from the actual aircraft itself. What we really have here is a beautiful 3D model of a DC-6. There were some issues when the aircraft was released with textures and stuff like that, and then PMDG came out and patched them almost instantly. So there's a lot of kudos that need to be put for that out there. There were some funny moments. I was streaming the aircraft and the whole fuselage would disappear and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's been patched, it's been fixed. But what I would like to do is, after doing a bit of a flight test on the aircraft today, I was able to quantify some of the problems that I feel are there with the actual flight model of the aircraft. And I think it's worthwhile actually putting something like this out there, because I'm sure that there are people out there that can't either put their finger on what the problem is, or maybe even PMDG would just like to see some constructive feedback. So what we'll do is we'll have a look over the aircraft. This is not going to be a review or anything like that. Yes, we know there's all this crap that you can have outside the aircraft, and it all looks beautiful. This is not what I care about with aircraft, though. I care about the flight model. I care about the handling of the aircraft. I care about the cockpit. I care how the aircraft actually handles as me as a consumer. And this stuff, hey, it looks pretty. I'm never going to use it. I looked at it once and we got rid of it. This menu system here, we can talk about that. Actually, we will talk about the menu systems because that's where I'm going to start with one of the first problems that are with the aircraft. I'm actually going to bring the aircraft up to a ready to start state, which I like. We're just pressing one button there. Fuel state for this test flight, we're going to go with no cargo. We're in the alpha version of the aircraft, and we're just going to set 50% of fuel. So we've got a nice light load. We'll be able to climb out, and I mean, this thing is not a sprightly aircraft, right? Even with the 50% fuel load, I'm expecting to get anywhere from 500 to 1,000 foot per minute climb out of it. That's not a lot of a climb rate. So we've got the aircraft set up ready for start. We'll jump into the cockpit and we'll talk about the engines. We'll talk about the flight model. The first thing we're going to talk about is one of the menus here, and that's the artificial flight engineer right here. I understand what PMDG were going for here, is that the complexity of the aircraft, the complexity of the engines, let's be honest here, the aircraft is not actually complex. There's just a single switch for a single system. That doesn't mean it's complex, it just means there's lots of switches for individual systems. There's no systems integration with this aircraft. That's why there's lots of gauges, there's lots of switches. So I understand why having this artificial flight engineer here is a good idea. For the first time you sit in the aircraft, even for the first two flights, I used the artificial flight engineer here. After that, I realized the limitations after two flights. Now, the first limitation that we have here is, well, I'm not even going to use him because I don't want him to break the aircraft right now. But he works, the artificial, he or she works up until takeoff. At takeoff, the artificial flight engineer has complete control of the throttles. And in fact, maybe I'll demonstrate it in the air. The main problem with the AFE is this only represents a perfect flight. And what I mean by a perfect flight here is we're going to break out our pen here. What I mean by a perfect flight is if that we took off, so we take off, we climb at a constant climb rate, we have a cruise, and then we descend and we land. That is what the artificial flight engineer can do. We'll give it a big tick. However, what happens when we go to take off and we climb and we cruise and we're given a step descent and then hold altitude here and then come down to land? Herein lies the problem. There is actually no way, there is no way that I can actually set a new cruise here. Yes, I could go from the descent checklist back up to the cruise, but then I now need to change from cruise down to descent for a second time. The problem is that once I go into this descent checklist here, I lose control of the throttles. The AFE has complete and utter control of the throttles. And this is a problem because I don't want to, if I'm really flying this aircraft, if I'm really sitting there and wanting to fly this aircraft as a study level simulator, as soon as I've started my descent, I don't need to redo my cruise checklist. And when I tick that box for cruise, when I tick this box here, when I go, yes, I would like this, please, it redoes the cruise checklists, sets the aircraft up for cruise, but I'm on a descent. I'm on the way to landing. What I don't like is that the descent here, it actually takes control of your throttle. Everything would be okay. Everything would be okay if I was able to do this step descent here. I was able to cruise and step descend, and now I'm just going to hold 10,000 feet here. And then I was able to reset cruise power. If I was able to reset cruise power, that would be wonderful. And all I need to do, literally all I need to do is advance my throttle back up to 35 inches, whatever the altitude is, whatever it has to be, is all I need to do is advance. But as soon as I have this box here ticked, as soon as I have that green, I lose control of that. I have no control over the aircraft. And I don't like that. It's a bit of a flaw. I think what might be a better solution here, is if the AFE had a call out and said, okay, descent checklist, set descent power, like as a voice or something, or even as a pop-up, I don't care, but set descent power 25 inches. So then now it's my job as the pilot operating. I can now set 25 inches with my throttle at home or using my mouse or whatever. There is a better option here than limiting me through the scope of the aircraft. Unless I'm doing this perfect flight here, going from top to bottom, unless I'm doing that, I'm limited with the AFE. So after the second flight, I've not used this. I've not used it at all. There is just simply no requirement for the AFE, especially if you're like someone like myself that wants to fly on Pilot Edge or VATSIM or Iveo, places like that, where you're under control, where maybe you'll be given a step descent. Not all of us, and I understand not all of us are flying online. There's a lot of people that will do this. This is their flight profile. That's what it is. But for the guys that play online, guys and girls that play online, this doesn't work. This AFE doesn't work. So it's kind of a little bit of a moot point. I think it was going to be a selling point of this aircraft for a lot of people, but when you operate the aircraft, it's actually a distraction. It's actually a distraction. So I don't. This needs some work. The artificial flight engineer needs some work, and there's more I could talk about here. It's not just the descent thing. It's in range. It's everything. You actually get the throttle. I believe you get throttle power back on these two, just from memory. We'll have a look in here. I think you get throttle back there. But for these sections here, I have no throttle control. No throttle. We'll check it when we get in the air. I could be wrong. I don't like that. If this is a study level aircraft, I shouldn't feel like I'm flying a 172 with a co-pilot. And that's kind of what it feels like, where I've got a co-pilot that's setting power and all I'm doing is turning the wheel. I don't think that's what PMDG were going for in their product. I don't even think that's part of their actual product, their company mantra, is to make an aircraft easier to fly. I don't think that's even in their company policy, but that's what they've done here, and I think it's a bad idea. It goes away for what they're good at, which is making overly complex aircraft. Here, it's dumbed down a little. Anyway, I'm not going to harp on the flight engineer. There's some things that need to be worked there. Again, I'm not a developer for X-Plane or any other flight sim, and I just think this needs some work. This needs some people sitting around a table discussing it and thinking a little bit outside the box to actually get something working there. So other than that, I really like these menus. These are fantastic. We can set fuel. Why did my fuel change? Whatever. Okay, we'll save the loadout and out we go. Engines here, I was stuffing around doing barrel rolls and stuff like that with the aircraft earlier, so we'll go ahead and we'll fix the engines. Oh, here's another point. Here's another point. I shouldn't be able to repair the engines in flight. When I'm flying, I should not, if I've made a boo-boo and I've broken an engine, I shouldn't just be able to open this up and tick the repair engine #1 box and now my engine goes green. I shouldn't be able to do that. I shouldn't be able to do that. What else do I need to do? Let's just top up all this oil. We lost a bit in that last flight. Airframe hours. I do like that there's a time here. I do like this. It's only a small thing, but I do like seeing that I can count how many hours I've been in the aircraft. But anyway. What else we got? Settings. I don't like the head shake. I'm going to keep everything else on. I'm going to keep everything else on. Engine damage. So this is as real as it can get, except for some head shake, right? This is as real as I can get. All of the realism options here are all on. And this scenario state load thing there. Okay, so we're ready to start. Let's get into the cockpit, and we'll point out some things that are wrong in the cockpit. Now, the first thing that we'll actually see here is there's some kind of bug with these brake mean effective pressure gauges here. When we go ahead and have a good look here, if you watch these gauges, and for some reason my third engine is not doing it, it's probably ready for start. That's why. Oops, sorry guys. We'll set throttle there. But if we sit here and we wait long enough, we will see these gauges will just get a mind of their own. It's just a bug. That's just a minor coding thing. Don't care about it. It's something that can happen. Something's happening in the background that I have no idea about. But there's something there, and I don't think it did it in the first release, but I don't know. Okay, so the aircraft is ready for start. Okay, we've got it ready for start, although the flight control locks are still on. We'll unlock the flight controls. And I'll check they're full and free. How fantastic. And we're going to start #3 engine. Now, I'm going to hope. I have experienced a bug in this. There's I think it's on the Avsim forum now, that the carburetor heat bug where the carburetor heat will be too high. You get a little window up here and the engines just will refuse to work. So I have had that and I've had to reload the aircraft a few times because of that. But hey, we're going to see if we can get this thing started. We'll just get this thing ready for start. And it looks like, there we go, here go the gauges. So for some reason #3 isn't going, but we'll see these gauges are just doing their own thing right now. And these gauges are purely a measurement of the horsepower that the engine is producing. And right now we are producing 0 because nothing is happening. But for some reason they're doing their own thing. But that's okay. We can accept that. Now, I'm going to start the aircraft how PMDG has set out the aircraft to be started. So with the throttle set, fuel is on. It actually has the mixture turned on here. It also has the ignition turned on. And if I have the throttle set in the right position, all I need to do now to start the engine is press this button. And I could be looking up here, turning on the cockpit lights, doing absolutely anything else other than monitoring the engines, and the engines will start. And look at that. #3 engine has happily started, with the mixture at full rich. With the mixture at full rich, the ignition on, no boost pump on, and is just started like there's not a care in the world. Now you might say, why is this a problem? Well, that's it. Why is this a problem? Well, if the engine was modeled off the real aircraft, the start cycle for this engine is, if you've read the manual, will count 9 blades. These gauges are still doing their own thing. We'll count through 9 blades. 1, 2, 3. The captain or the co-pilot will be counting while the flight engineer will be manipulating these controls. Now, I understand that this has to be a bit of a simism. This has to be a simism here because trying to manipulate 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, mixture 6, and the boost pump 7 controls all at once is probably a little bit above us being in a simulator. So I get that these buttons, I understand that these buttons should just be pressed. However, the way I just started that engine would never, ever in a million years start this aircraft up in real life. The R2800 engine has a very, very finicky carburetor. In fact, it has a automatic mixture control as well as an automatic pressure density blah 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 thing. They're all built into the carburetor. And in fact, the start procedure of this aircraft is that the mixture should not ever, ever be turned on until the engine has exceeded 800 to 1000 RPM. And the reason being for that is when the mixture comes up to full rich or to auto rich or auto lean, it will actually flood the engine. The engine is not bringing in enough air. The reason it will flood is because it has a great big restriction in the intake, being the supercharger. Until the engine is spinning above 800 to 1000 RPM, the supercharger is not drawing enough air through the intake tubes and drawing enough fuel and air into the actual cylinders. So if the mixture is all the way up, if the mixture here is all the way up, like it is at start, the engine will just flood. It will just flood because it will just start pouring fuel into the carburetor. That fuel has nowhere to go except into the actual intake. It'll get absorbed, it'll sit there actually in front of the supercharger. The supercharger not spinning fast enough, the engine's not spinning fast enough to draw air, fuel just pools in the bottom of the intake, and then you'll hear a large bang as your supercharger makes a bid for freedom out the side of the engine. This is not good. The engine should not start like this. It just should not start like this. The correct way, and this is the way that I would like it to see it started. There's a lot to do, but this is how this is a way that would be a simism to get the aircraft started correctly. And this is following the correct checklist. Is I would engage the starter, count 9 blades, or even better, have the artificial flight engineer calling out the blades. 1, well, actually, they're counting 3. So 3, 6, 9, and then you would actually go ahead and add fuel. That would be absolutely perfect. At this point, I can forgive that you need these four buttons pressed if there was just a little bit more interaction with the startup. There's a little bit more interaction with the startup. So this is how I would like to see the engine started, is that you would, oh, that was the other problem. Sorry, lots of problems here, sorry. Sorry about that noise. Someone just followed me on on Twitch and I'm not even streaming, so yes, so what I would like to see here, is that these switches, I don't mind. I don't mind that they don't need to be manipulated. I don't mind that these two should be held before the start and then prime and boost is added as you see fit, blah, 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 blah. I don't mind. But what I would like to see is a better start cycle. I would like to see that I would hold these. I would hear after, oh, sorry, disregard. I need to actually select the right engine here. So number 4. So I'd like to hear that we're going to start number 4. Okay, starting number 4. Hold this on. We'll count the blades. As they're on, we'll go ahead and select the booster. On comes the ignition now. The engine should be starting to fire. And now we'll go ahead and add mixture. And the engine should be running. That is how I believe the engine should be running. And we can see the engine's coming up here. It looks like our throttle is just a little bit too high. A little bit too high. Okay, so I'm back. I had a little bit of a sound issue there, as well as a bit of a noob out on the internet. But anyway, so that is what I would like to see with an engine startup. Again, let's just compare that to how the aircraft starts up right now. Ignition on, no boost pump. Mixture, rich. This is for number 2. Starter selector. Over onto number 2. Press this button, and I could literally be looking at this oxygen regulator right here. Hello, oxygen regulator, what are you doing? No, your blinker's not working. Worst animation ever. I'm kidding. I really don't care what I'm looking at, and with a bit of luck, fingers crossed, oh look at that, the engine's running. That is not a study level simulation. The engines are not this easy to start. They are not. Having the mixture at full rich would equal a 0 start. 0. Why is this locked again? I unlocked that. So I'll start the engine how I would suggest it to be started. So we're going to select number 1. Number 1 is selected, would call for start, hold the ignition on, we would count the blades, would wait for 9, fuel boost pumps on while we're counting to 9, on comes the ignition. Right now the engine should be firing. Right now, let's actually show this. Right now the engine should be firing. With the primer on, this engine will actually go all the way up to 800 to 1000 RPM. You can run this engine on the primer. The mixture is only to keep the engine running once you go past 800 RPM. So when the engine just, in this start cycle here, sits at 250 RPM, it's incorrect as well. It is just incorrect. This gauge should be starting to pop up here.
Made it sounded like constructive stuff to me, not a bash.
Now I'm going to have to edit that out of the video. Apparently, for you guys, anyone watching the YouTube video, I was trying to record this on the OBS, but apparently pressed the start streaming button instead of actually recording. And so now people know that there is a donation button and a text-to-speech function. So I probably should disable that. Anyway, we'll continue with this look. Yes, so when the engine is running through its start cycle, because the primer is depressed, right? This is the primer there. Because the primer is depressed, we can see it visually being depressed. Because it's depressed, the engine should run. The engine should start to fire. The engine should start to increase above this 250 RPM and start gradually making its way up here. Making its way up here. That doesn't happen. So the start cycle is wrong. Let's just watch that, okay? So we'll keep the mixture off. And we'll run it through its start cycle here. So we'll have the ignition on. This is the standard way that it wants to work. We'll keep the fuel boost pumps on. It should be on, but we'll keep it off. This is another thing. This is the other thing that's wrong, but it'll start with the boost pump off, and it shouldn't. So right now, the engine's going to 250 RPM. We can see here that the primer is depressed, and the engine will not spool above 250 RPM. That is one of the problems. That will be one of the problems. That is one of the problems there. Well, let's get the engine up and running. Again, this boost pump should come on, and it doesn't need to. It needs to come on to start. And in this case, we'll be able to start it without it. There we go. Now the engine's starting to fire into life. Now. We'll just let it sit there and warm up. Let the engines warm up here a bit. Okay, they're slowly coming alive. Now this is the second issue here. Is I started these engines and with the throttle setting, we're at 1500 RPM here. 1500 RPM on the engine. With oil pressures really low and oil temps low is not good. It looks like it's artificially limited. From what I can see here, it looks artificially limited. where we're below the 40-degree line. This 40-degree line is when we can pull above 1200 RPM. So let's go and have a look where 1200 RPM is, right? 1200 RPM is here. So it looks artificially limited while the oil temperature is coming up. So I'll bring the power back to actually set it properly. We'll actually set the power properly. This number one engine still taking some time to get up and running. So we're going to do it right. We're going to do it correctly. We'll go ahead and get the boost pumps onto low pressure just for start. There's no downside of having the boost pumps on right now. And we can go ahead and get an engine selector. We'll turn that off. We'll turn these things on. We're not going to need them for the flight, but we'll turn them on. Actually, this will be the next thing I'll point out that I don't like. On. This number one engine is really, I get it, like here they're trying to, it looks like it's trying to be simulated that it's, it takes a while for the engine to get up and running. But this is what it should be doing when it's on the primer. It should be doing this when it's on the primer, not when the mixture's at full ridge. Not when the mixture's on at full ridge. Again, if it was full ridge, and we're at below 800 RPM, the engine should be flooded. But what I'll do is I'll add some power here, just try and clear the engine. Let the engine warm up. While the engine's warming up, I want to talk about some other things that I don't like about the cockpit. Now, the main thing is, I don't know if this will show up in the recording. I don't know if it'll show up in the recording or not, but these. As I sit right here with this field of view, I cannot read what these numbers are. I cannot read that, and I cannot read our DME down here. Cannot read them whatsoever. In fact, it takes me, I need to zoom in like this, and even here at this zoom level, here, it's hard to read. I can tell this is 335, I mean, I can read, I'm not blind, but the thing is, that tiny little orange thing in there is just too bright. It's just too bright because I cannot make out the numbers. I cannot differentiate with a really quick viewing of the aircraft what I'm actually reading there. Now that might not sound like it's very important, but however, when you're operating in Pilot Edge or online, these instruments are very, very important to be able to read very, very quickly. I need to be able to look down at my DME reading and tell instantly what I'm at. I need to be able to tell instantly my distance to, or my speed to, or time to. I need to be able to see that. I can't see that quickly and easily here. Now it's a bit of an operational thing. Yeah, okay, maybe it's my graphics settings, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But if anyone else has the same graphics settings that I do right now, they're going to have this problem here. And it should be fixed. All it will take is the background orange to be removed. The background orange in the back of the 8, you know, the standard LCD, whatever you call it, it just needs to be reduced back from orange to dull, to nothing. In real life, these gauges are not the gauges. These common nav stack is not that hard to read. There are very prominent numbers. The numbers are very easy to see. Maybe in direct sunlight it's really hard to see, but there's no direct sunlight. There's all these gauges and stuff up here, right? So that is my thought on those instruments there. The next issue we're going to show is heat on the ground. What we're going to do is we're going to set idle. We're going to set idle in the R2800s. Now the R2800 on the ground is, it's kind of like a whale on the side of a beach. They like being in the air. Not whales, the engines. The R2800 likes being in the air. There's not sufficient cooling on the ground for an R2800 to sit there and idle indefinitely. Because it's a twin row radial, the second row radial and the second row of the radial engine will actually increase in temperature very, very, very quickly. because it doesn't receive any prop blast that the front row radials do, that the front row of the cylinders do. So because of that, there's this reduced cooling effect. There's this reduced cooling effect of the engines. So what is required, what is required on the ground is that the cowl flaps, here they are up here, these cowl flaps need to be open to keep the engine cool. So what we're going to do now is we are going to completely close the cowl flaps on the outboard number 1, inboard number 4, inboard number 3. And we're going to watch the temperatures. Now we'll jump outside the aircraft and have a look. And we'll see what I mean by the cowl flaps. Here's the cowl flaps open. Open. Here they are, fully closed. When they're fully open on the ground, they are providing a very, very good cooling, they are cooling the engine or allowing the engine to breathe. In fact, when we look out the back of the engine here, we can see how much more airflow there is to compare the two. If I can get my thing to work here. We can see, this is really apparent, eh? Let's move this way a little. We can really see how apparent this cooling effect is. This entire side of the engine over here, let me just pick a slightly bigger pen. This entire side of the engine over here is closed. No air, or very, very little air, is escaping the engine to assist in cooling. Compare that to this side, where we now have this nice, massive cooling effect coming out the side here. You're going to hear another noise, sorry guys. This engine, the cylinder head temps should go above, even at idle, the cylinder head temps on this engine should go above the red. As it stands right now, this engine, the CHTs, should go above the red. These engines were not designed to sit on the ground without cowl flaps open. They are incapable of being on the ground without cowl flaps going and sufficient cooling. So we're going to compare them. We can see we've done the same left and right, okay? So the inboard, left, right, we can see, okay? And we'll go back into the cockpit and have a look. Now we've been sitting here talking for a little while. We're at 1000 RPM. Let's go and have a look at the difference in the cylinder head temperatures. Well, it's about 20 degrees. There's about 20 degrees Celsius of the cylinder head temps right now when we compare. So this is obviously this is the one where it's open, and this is closed. Right now I am abusing the engines. I am being an abusive pilot and ruining a perfectly good $250,000 R2800. There should not be a difference this small. The delta between these two of the cylinder head temps should not be this low, even at idle. And it gets worse when we start adding power. Let's go ahead and we'll add some power. So let's go all the way up to 35 inches. We'll just check parking brake is set. Parking brake is set. Here comes the power. Be nice and gentle with the engines, even though we are abusing them. We're going to pull 35 inches of power. We'll set that. We'll actually draw some power off the ship's batteries. We'll get rid of the GPU. And now we're going to sit here and wait. Now we are going to sit here and wait and let the engines warm up. Let's have a look at all of the other gauges here. So here is engine 1, 2, 3, 4. We put a split down everything here, right? Put a split down here of everything. The oil pressures are exactly the same. Remember this engine here, let's just confirm this right now while we're waiting for the engine to warm up. So number 4 is fully open. Number 3 is fully closed. Number 2 is fully open. Number 1 is fully closed. Fuel pressure, we don't care about. The oil pressure is exactly the same. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because there should be a difference in the oil temperatures. Remember, the cowl flaps are closed here. I could see someone saying somewhere along the lines, well, I mean, the cylinder head temp, it's increasing there, so that's, okay, I get that. Well, the cylinder head temp has nothing to do with oil. However, the way the engines work is there is plenty of oil that's plumbed, it's actually old oil that's used throughout the engine is actually plumbed through the cylinder heads. It's kind of like a subsidiary cooling, but it's not dealt to the cylinder heads under pressure. So because of that, the oil that actually runs through the cylinder heads will actually pick up a lot of heat. Now that heat has to go somewhere. We're not flying. We do not have any cooling effect from an oil cooler. We should see a difference right here between the oil temperatures between the cowl flaps that are open and the cowl flaps that are closed. Thermodynamics, right? It doesn't. Thermodynamics happens. The heat has to go somewhere. Now, 20. If you're telling me, well, yes, if you're going to tell me yes, well, there's a 30-degree difference here in cylinder head temperature. It's absorbed by the oil. Well, where? Where is it absorbed by the oil? The oil temperature is exactly the same. The oil coolers are not efficient until you're above about 80 to 100 knots. You need airflow for the oil coolers to be efficient. This is incorrect. These oil temperatures right here do not represent what is actually happening with the engine right now. The carburetor heat, I don't believe this is representative as well. Where the carburetor is, it's attached to a supercharger that right now, what RPM are we doing? We're doing 2,300 RPM. Quick math. That supercharger is now, math is so hard, that supercharger is doing anywhere from 15 to 18,000 RPM right now, and it's hot. It is really hot. I would question this. I can't quantify this. I can't quantify the carburetor air temperature right now. Yeah, I can't quantify this, but I don't believe this carb heat should be this low. Right now, we're on the ground with no weather and ISA conditions. It's 15 degrees outside, and the engine is running really, really hot right now. Really, really hot. The engine is really hot. I don't know how I can stress this enough. But this carburetor air temperature here, I believe is incorrect as well. I feel bad by bringing this up because I can't quantify why. I don't know. I've never seen a carb air temp in the Corsair I worked on. It did have it there, but it was never an issue. It was never an issue. Would not expect to see this. And the reason why is the way the carburetor works in this aircraft is it's there's actually no fuel is added to the air as it's actually running through the carburetor. So even though the air actually does go through a venturi, that's all it's doing. There's no fuel being added and atomized, right? So when fuel gets added, when it turns into when the fuel comes out of a regular carburetor, it gets put into the throat of the carby and it atomizes. And as it atomizes, it also evaporates a little bit, which will decrease the temperature of the air mass that's flowing through the carburetor. This carburetor does not have that. This carburetor literally has a venturi that allows air to go through. It measures how much air is going through, and then will send that off to the fuel control valve. And the fuel control valve will then tell how much fuel to go into the engine. The fuel is actually presented to the engine at the throat of the supercharger. That is downstream of the carburetor. So right now this carburetor, this air temperature in the carburetor should be picking up a whole lot of temperature, of residual pressure from the supercharger. Now I'm not saying it should be up here somewhere, because there is still some cooling effect through the venturi, but this temperature should be up here somewhere. It really should be up here somewhere. I don't like doing things like that where I can't quantify it. I can't say, well, yes, it should be exactly at 20 degrees right now because it's ISO conditions and the aircraft has got this many BTUs of... I just can't do that. But this needs to be looked at. But what we're getting at here is the oil pressure and oil temperature. There is no difference in the oil temperature. You say, oh yes, there's a 1 degree. No, there's not. If you sit in front of the gauge, it's fine. What do you call that? There's a And when you're sitting in a cockpit and you look across and the gauge looks different to what it is, special word for it, I've forgotten. There should be a difference in these two oil temperatures, is what I'm saying. Again, this one is, oh wow, not that big. This one right here is the closed cowl flap. This one right here is the open one. Is open. Now let's go ahead and have a look at our cylinder head temperatures. We've been on the ground here at 34 inches, I guess. We'll just add a little bit more power just to keep it all nice and stable. There we go, so at 34 inches, here we go. And what's our delta? Well, we're at 190 degrees on the cowl flap that's open. So 190 here. And we're at 210, 20, 225, 230. We'll be generous. There is a delta right now of 40 degrees Celsius. 40 degrees Celsius. Between this. A delta of 40 degrees Celsius between an engine, an engine that has this much cooling effect versus an engine that has, I can't even show you. The only cooling effect right now is around the exhaust of this engine. That's it. That is it. That is the only way that this engine can actually cool the cylinder head temps on the ground, is actually flowing air through the engine. It's like gills of like a fish. The air needs to come in and it needs to be vented out. It needs to vent. Here the air is coming in and it's going nowhere. It's turning into an oven in here right now. Now I know what you might say as well. Well, there's some prop blast and all these other things, and you know there's prop blast in there. Yes, you would be correct. However, prop blast, because we have a two-row radial, prop blast only affects the front row cylinders. The residual cooling effect here is how wide these cylinders are at the front. The actual space for air to get through to the rear row cylinders is that big. This is how big we're talking right now. This big. That's what we're trying to cool. That's how we're trying to cool our rear row cylinders right now. And there's not enough cooling action. There is not. Yes, the prop blast and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. We need more than prop blast going through the engines to cool them down. Okay, I think that's enough talking about the engines here. I think we've got a good understanding, right? We have a good understanding that there's a lot of temperature that's being produced by this engine that is disappearing, not being modelled, or I don't know where it's going. I actually wonder what would happen if we went lean. I don't know. I haven't tried the lean. I haven't tried leaning it and seeing what we'll get in the cylinder head temps there. But the engines that are closed, they should be overread. These gauges should be off scale. This is abusing the engines. Now we'll transition and we'll talk about the flight model. Let's talk about the flight model and the shortcomings of the flight model. We've talked about some things in the cockpit. I don't like the gauges here. I don't really like those. But I don't really like them. I can't read them, so yes. But let me stop here for just 30 seconds. Let me just stop here for 30 seconds. I've talked about all of the bad things so far. Take 30 seconds to just take in that this 3D model is actually beautiful. There is a lot of work. I can see that. I can see the amount of work here. The gauges have inbuilt hysteresis modeled. Phenomenal. Amazing. There's reflections. The gauges bounce. The instrument panel bounces. There is so much going on here. It is a beautiful 3D model. The only thing missing, I think, is seeing this thing bouncing around. It's on elastic, right? If this thing was bouncing around, I like it. Everyone in stream's probably going to be laughing at me because I don't care about animations, but ooh, yes. See an animation here. Oh, aircrafts. Beautiful. Well, this is all we need. This is what's missing, guys. That. But it's beautifully animated from the gauges, the individual gauges. Yes, I know it's copy-paste for a few of these items here, but it feels like a good aircraft. I want to give this thing a really good review, but I can't. I can't because the things I care about are not well modeled. That's engines and the flight model. The 3D model external, the 3D model on the inside, that's actually the co-pilot seat, or is it the flight engineers? No, that's the flight engineer that sits there, right? It's the flight engineer there. I'm trolling. If you don't understand the troll, that's okay. We'll not define it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We have 3D oxygen regular. It really is great. This is everything. Everything is great. It really is great. But I can't put my support behind it. My support, who knows what it means? Who knows what that means? But I can't put my support behind it when I jump in the thing and I see these are the problems. And I expect that from a PMDG product, right? I expect those tiny little things to be modeled. If it was me producing the aircraft, I wouldn't care that this gauge, oh my god. I wouldn't care that this gauge has the correct reflection from the angle this way and that way and there. I wouldn't care. What I want to see is the engine working. I want to see these being correct. I want to see the oil pressure and the oil temperature being correct. I want to see cow flap usage being correct. Those are the things that I expect from this kind of product. Those are the things that I wanted to expect from this product. So let's start on the ground with the flight model. Before we go any further, let's start on the ground. What we're going to do is we're going to turn on the external flight model. We'll bring the engines back to idle. Actually, I'm going to do a few more things in the cockpit here. I don't like that the cow flaps are not open. So I'll set the cow flaps at 3 degrees open here for takeoff. We'll set power back to idle. Get all movements with the radial nice and slow with the power. Just be all nice and slow. Okay, cow flaps are open. We're outside the aircraft and we're set at idle. Here's one of the things about the flight model that we spotted in the last stream. Show the flight model. So what it seems like how the engines have been modelled, or how the airframe has been modelled, is torque effect or prop wash has been incorrectly done. Now, what we would expect is all of these engines are rotating in the same direction, right? All of these engines, I don't know if this is the correct direction, I don't know. But all of these engines are rotating in the one direction. So what we would expect from that is a slipstream coming out of the end of the engines going in one direction, right? What we would expect to see from that is also a subsequent roll in the opposite direction. This is not due to anything happening on top of the wing. This is not due to anything. This roll effect is all to do. There's two things why this roll effect happens. Is that we would actually see an impact on the tail, which would invoke a adverse yaw in, sorry, wrong direction. We would see adverse yaw in the in this direction, not the wrong direction, in this direction, which would also invoke a bit of a roll coupling because we're talking about rudder here. And the other ones over here, and these ones are here, these ones are here. So we can expect, what we would expect to see here is a little bit of torque and a little bit of adverse yaw. It seems to be how they've modelled that, and I can accept this. If the plane flew correctly, I can accept it. I can accept this happening. However, now watch what happens when we see the flight model output here. As I increase power, what you'll start to see here starting to see it yet? Right there. We are starting to see lift vectors forming over the top of the wings. Now admittedly, that's not all that bad. That's all that bad because yes, there is some prop wash going over the wings right now. There is some prop wash going over the wings right now, which would be producing some lift. Now, because again, I'm not a flight model developer, I don't know what the scale is on these vectors. I don't know what the scale is on these lift vectors right here and right here. So I can't tell how much lift is being produced right now. I don't know the number, I can't tell. So I can't quantify whether that's too much or not enough. But I will start by saying this, that even though there is airflow coming over these wings, the airflow is at a zero angle of attack. There is a zero, the airflow is literally hitting the wings like this. There is no angle of attack between the prop wash and the wing. So what I would like to do as an investigation, again, not a flight model developer, is to know how much of a vector, what scale are these lift vectors in? Because I find it hard to believe the prop wash would produce that much lift. Although, okay, they're disregard. It looks like there is a negative lift on the underside of the wing. I will give you some kudos. I did not spot that last time. Why that makes a difference, why that makes a big difference, is that if there's a zero angle of attack, oh god, the stream just died, sorry. If there's a zero angle of attack, and we have a symmetrical airfoil, these are not quite symmetrical, but if there's a zero angle of attack, well, there should be some residual lift on the bottom side of the wing, especially with such a round leading edge on a wing like this. I did not see that. Kudos to the flight model developers. However, that's not actually what I want to point out here. It's just a really, it's really just a question about the scale of these vectors here. The real question is, why is there a difference between the two? Why then does this lift vector different to this left vector? There is a differential here, and I think what's happening, I think what's been done is to invoke this roll coupling that you would expect to see from all of the engines spinning and all of the prop wash going in one direction, hitting the tail, blah blah blah. What I think has happened is the flight model has been designed to actually model torque, but it's modeling torque aerodynamically. And they're different forces. They affect the aircraft in different way. Torque effect from the prop tries to rotate the entire fuselage, right? Torque effect from the prop is trying to rotate the fuselage in the opposite direction to rotation. It's not dependent on airflow. There is no dependence on airflow. And in fact, if I was sitting here with full power right now, if I had a set of scales under the aircraft, I would expect to see this side of the aircraft, this set of scales, I would expect it to actually be a little bit higher than this side. We're only talking a little bit here. We're only talking a few kilos, maybe a bit more. There would be a difference between them. I can't quantify this. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But you would expect to see the wheel that is in the opposite, on the downside of the blah, 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 blah. We would expect to see a difference in weight on the ground. How it's been modelled in this flight model, however, it's been done aerodynamically. We can just see that sitting on the ground here. We can see the difference in lift vectors from this wing to this wing is different. So when this aircraft is in the air, this is going to be the roll coupling that we would see. That the right-hand wing would want to roll, the left-hand wing would want to come under because it's not producing as much wing. This is for any given angle of attack. And this is why it's a problem. Is it doesn't matter if I'm at a 10-degree angle of attack or a negative angle of attack, the aircraft is always going to have a tendency to roll in one direction. Yes, it is dependent to power, blah, 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 but it's just not quite right. It's just not quite right because there is no coupling of yaw at the same time. There's no roll. And right now, yeah, there would be a difference in if you put scales under the aircraft and blah, 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 blah. But it's just not quite right. It's just something you would expect from a PMDG level aircraft, is what I'm saying. Again, we can still see these lift vectors, right? They're just a little bit... I think that's how they've modelled torque. I could be wrong. I think that's how they've modelled torque. Okay, let's jump inside the aircraft and we'll talk about the actual flight model. So what we're going to do, we'll do our pre-takeoff checks. We got green, 3 green, mixture is rich, prop is set full fine, controls are free and full, We're not doing anything super fancy. Ignition is on, boost pumps are on, inverters are on, generators are on. We're good to go. We'll set 30 inches, we'll call stable. We're at 30 inches, we'll call stable. And just to make sure everything is all up and up, go ahead and make sure we have 50% fuel. We'll save the loadout. 50% fuel, and now we're going to take off. So engines are stable. Let's go ahead and add full power. Again, you could look at the cylinder head temps, and we've been sitting here at a lot of power for a while. Here we go. Brakes are released. Takeoff power is set. Airspeed's alive. And we need flaps. Oops. Didn't complete our takeoff check. There's 15. Here comes 20. There we go. 100 knots, we're going to rotate. And there's 100 knots. Up we go. Small pitch change. Really gradual climb. This aircraft does not have a lot of residual power, so this is what a typical climb rate is. And by typical, I mean this is your climb rate. This is how much ground you're looking at right now. And we're going to climb to 140 knots. We're not going to pull the flaps until we're clear of obstacles. And clear of obstacles for me is above, say, about 1,000 feet in this aircraft. If you actually maintain your pitch attitude with the aircraft, pull flaps, you'll actually go from a 500 foot per minute climb down to a negative 400 foot per minute climb. So there's a 1,000 foot per minute difference in your climb rate there. It's quite interesting. It's a lot of fun. So you have to be very, very, very conscious of where you are in the world, and if there's mountains in front of you. Because if you pull flap early to try and get above them, you're just going to fly yourself into the side of them. Okay, so here we are at LAX. We'll go ahead and I know there's no mountains off to my left, so I'm going to head and roll over to the left. There's 1,000 foot. We're at 140 knots. And I want to maintain 140 knots while I climb for the time being, just to get a little bit more clearance above the ground, especially now I have no visual reference over the ocean. Now we're at ISA conditions right now. Let's actually keep the... So ISA conditions is QNH is 292 and temperature is 15 degrees Celsius. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of the flaps now. So flaps are identified, flaps are going to come up. There's 15, just slowly pause. You can see we just add a little bit more back trim there. There's 10, speeds are increasing through 150. Let's go flaps all the way up. There we go, we can see there with a little bit of a pitch change, we can maintain that 500 foot per minute climb. The aircraft will accelerate. Now we'll go ahead and we'll set the maximum except for takeoff, that METO. No, it's not that difficult to say. And then we'll set, I should have prop first, right? Prop first, but anyway. We'll set maximum except for takeoff, which will be 2600 RPM. And that's pretty much what we're going to use for the rest of the flight. We'll change our pitch here, just pitch down just a little bit. And we'll bring our brake mean effective pressure back to 160 with a manifold pressure of about 46 inches. Excuse me. Maintaining 160 knots at about 1200 foot per minute climb. Climbing like a rocket ship because all we have is fuel on board. Now what we'll talk about is stability a little bit. We'll talk about stability in the aircraft. And before we do, we can actually see this roll coupling with power. If I don't touch the aircraft, we'll make sure my trim is perfectly set. And here we can just see, if you look very, very, very closely, we are starting to get a little bit of a right wing up situation here where the left wing is rolling down. But we can see the right wing's coming up, right? We're in a roll. In a roll like this. In a roll, we can see that. So this is the coupling that we're talking about with the difference in lift there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain 160 knots. I'm going to use 160 knots as my maneuvering speed. I'm going to set 35 inches of power, which is about 110 brake mean effective pressure, which works out being about, that's about 600 to 700 horsepower per engine right There's a calculation you can use to actually figure out what your actual horsepower is for each engine. Okay, so I'm going to actually use some aileron trim here to just keep the aircraft level. A little bit too much. We'll set 32 inches now. Oh, my gear is still down. That won't help. Obviously the button on my Cytec controller didn't pick up okay, so now we'll go ahead and... It's actually, I don't know why the hell we're climbing so well then, but anyway, that's a thought for another day. A little bit too much aileron trim. Now let's talk a bit about stability of the aircraft, okay? So, I'm going to pause the aircraft right here. No, I'm not. Yeah, I am. Let's have a look outside the aircraft. Oh. Well, I mean, there's that. I mean, we could probably talk about that. I was going to try and reference the wings to fuselage here, but I guess this will do. Aircraft design. Let's talk about that. Ignore that the fuselage has gone missing. We'll ignore that the fuselage is going missing. Let's talk about what dihedral is. Dihedral is the angle between the horizontal. Dihedral is the angle between the horizontal and the wings. So we see we have an angle here, right? If we use this as our center point, we imagine the wings keep coming through to here. As we imagine there is well, we don't imagine, we can see there is dihedral here. Now, what dihedral does for an aircraft is that in a roll, so when you input a roll coupling, I keep using that word, sorry, disregard, that when we actually bring the aircraft into a roll, what it will actually provide is a positive dynamic stability around the lateral axis. Now that's a whole heap of fancy words to saying that when you roll the aircraft has a tendency to roll back to this level, to the wing's level position. This aircraft does not do that. And by this aircraft, I mean this flight model does not do that. The way it happened, the way dihedral works and the way it actually affects the roll is, we'll talk about it when we actually have a roll. But what it actually does is, having this dihedral is it changes the angle of attack between the wing on the inside of the turn versus the outside of the turn. And what that does is, if you have an effective difference of angle of attack versus relative airflow, there is a differential in lift, which means then if there is a differential in lift from this side of the wing to this side of the wing, then one of these wings will rise, one of these wings will lower, until it gets to a steady state, which is wings level. This is not what we see in this aircraft. Again, just, I don't know. There's no rudder either. I don't know. Yes, I need to unpause, right? I need to unpause, yeah? So here we are, we're back flying. Speeds are at 175. Sure, we'll just use speeds at 175. I am going to invoke a roll, and we are going to have a look at how the aircraft handles it. And in fact, I'm going to pull a 30-degree roll, which is quite a large roll for an aircraft like this. Over we go. Let's invoke a 30-degree angle of bank. I'm going to stay on the controls here, hold the 30-degree angle of bank. Now I'm going to trim the aircraft so it maintains level. Here we go, we're at 30 degrees. I'm just going to keep adding aft trim, get the aircraft to actually stay on the controls here, still on the controls. Just trying to trim the aircraft in pitch so it will maintain altitude. A little bit more nose down, a little bit more nose down. Right now my hands are completely off the control column. Oh, we got our flight model back. Perfect. My hands are completely off the control column. There's a little bit more nose up, I want to say. And the aircraft is trucking along right now with absolutely no care in the world whatsoever. Absolutely none. Yes, we come in here and we have a look at our artificial horizon right now. Let's have a look at it. Well, we've reduced down to a 25-degree angle of bank. We can see that here, 25-degree angle of bank. I'm still not touching the controls right now. I have not touched the controls this entire time I've been talking. Absolutely none. We're climbing a little bit, so I'll just add a little bit of nose forward trim. I have not touched the controls. We're at now 20 degrees. Also, this is to point this out. This is actually even uncoordinated, so this is even worse. If I actually coordinate the turn, so here we'll go back to a 30-degree angle of bank, and I'll add just a tiny little bit of rudder to coordinate the turn. I do like that you need to coordinate the turns in this aircraft because, well, the ailerons on it are absolutely massive. They're basically barn doors, and so they have quite a lot of adverse yaw, and we need to change our pitch there. Maintain that 4,000 feet. A little bit more. Oh, there goes my mouse. Now I'm going to reduce that angle of roll. So I'm now not invoking any roll at all. Just flying the aircraft with trim and using rudder to keep the aircraft in balance. Have not touched the ailerons at all this entire bank. Not once. I haven't touched, sorry, the ailerons this entire turn. This is now at 200 knots. So now let's talk about why this is a problem. Why my joystick is also a problem as well. Oh, we lost our aircraft again. Whatever. It comes and goes. It's just it comes and goes whenever you want. So let's talk about how dihedral actually works. I mean, there's people out there that know this, okay? But for everyone that is just wondering why this is wrong, is we'll draw our horizontal plane line again, right? That's a bad line. Zoom in a little so we can see the wingtips of everything. There we go. So we'll draw our horizontal plane line. I'm going to have to exaggerate it a little. Why does this keep changing sides? Sorry, worst YouTube video ever. I can't even draw straight. This is... Where's a straight line, Epic Pen? Fuck. Sure, straight line. Okay, so the dihedral, what's actually happening here is the relative airflow that is hitting the aircraft or hitting the wing right now is actually in this direction, right? So the relative airflow is hitting the aircraft in this direction. Because we're in a bank, right? The air is coming from here. We're turning to the left. We're turning into the wind, right? So our relative airflow is coming from that direction. So what dihedral does, maybe if I do it in black, it'll work. Sure, close enough. So what dihedral does is, as we said, that there is an angle between the two. Well, now when we take into consideration where our relative airflow is coming from, so our relative airflow, let's say it's coming from this direction, and we'll do the same down here. That's not quite right. Our relative airflow here is coming from this direction. So now let's start drawing some lines. Let's draw some lines here. So we'll draw a vertical line. We're going to attempt to draw a vertical line here. We're going to attempt to draw a vertical line here. This is the angle that the air is hitting the wing. When we look at the angle of attack that is of the relative air that's hitting the wing, there is a difference. There is a difference, and we can't see it, but there is a difference. And what happens is the angle of attack on the upwind, the wing that's up high, because of the dihedral, actually has a less of, so the angle of attack to the relative airflow here is less than what is on the wing, the angle of attack on the bottom wing. So then what happens is we see a differential in lift. So the wing on the inside of the turn will have a greater lift vector than the wing on the outside of the turn. Makes sense, right? Again, I don't want to make this a lesson on dihedral here. Anhedral is the opposite, blah, 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 blah. But we don't need a lesson on that. What we want to do is look at how this flight model models that. And when we look at the aircraft here right now, I'll try and put it so we can see these green lines. That's probably the best. Is that there is no difference. We see there is a slight difference in lift in the center of the aircraft, and what this lift difference is all because of the power over the engines. This is how they're trying to. This is how the torque is being modeled, right? So right now there is a torque that's trying to bring the aircraft in this direction. However, the moment arm of this torque is only this far. So the actual roll effect that is being caused by this is minimal. Not much is happening here. But the bigger problem is when we look at our lift vectors here. That's a second one in, second one in. Let's have a look at our third one. Oh, fifth, can't count. These lift vectors, if I drew a line between them, are all the same. The aircraft is not modeling at all dihedral whatsoever. The aircraft should not be in this state. It should not be trucking along like this right now. Aerodynamically wise, this is unfortunately it's science, right? This is what happens. You pick up a textbook and read about it. This is not an opinion. This wing needs to retreat from where it is. For this aircraft to be in this angle of bank, I would need to have some form of aileron input to maintain the turn. I just have to have I have to have some kind of aileron input to maintain this turn, and there's none. There is no input at all right now. The aileron is completely like there's none. There's the trim tab. There's none. There is no deflection of the aileron right now at all. This is a problem. Now, it happens in left turns as well as right turns. There is no difference. You could say that, oh, yes, well, maybe the torque roll is actually holding the aircraft in the roll like this. Well, yes, then you would expect when you roll the aircraft in the opposite direction that it would actually do the opposite and make the roll diverge from its current state. It does not. It actually stays in the same angle of bank. Let's go ahead and show that. Let's go ahead and show that. We'll unpause. Here we go, around to the right. Still at 200 knots. We lost a little bit of altitude there. That's okay. There we go. Picked up all that altitude with bad pitch control. Back at 160 knots. I'll just add a little bit more go-go juice. Here we go. 30-degree angle of bank. In a level attitude. We're not climbing. We're not descending. A little bit of a climb there. Still trying to manage it. Still trying to manage that climb. That's because I added a bit more power, right? Well, look, we're in a steady state here, so we'll just use that. Okay, my hands are off the controls completely. Completely off the controls, and the aircraft is trucking along in a 30-degree angle of bank like no one's business. We'll increase that roll. Now we're, what, approximately 45 degrees, thereabouts. I'm just eyeballing it, flying it visually here. .45-degree angle of bank, DC-6, trucking along. Hands are off the controls. That's a problem. Now you might say, well, maybe, you know, there's something going on there, you're at straight and level. Worst case scenario, or best case scenario for dihedral to affect an aircraft will be in a descending turn. In a descending turn at high speed. So let's go ahead and do that. Because your relative airflow is now coming from below the wing, so you now have an angle of your angle of attack is not only increasing due to the wing angle, but also for the pitch attitude. And down we go, adding a whole heap of nose down trim here. Over we go, 30-degree angle of bank, hands off the controls, and the aircraft is just doing its own thing. Yeah, the controls are neutral right now. I just want to maintain that roll there. So, of course, to maintain the roll, I don't need to actually input any aileron. The aircraft will just keep turning for me. This is incorrect. I should need at least this. I should need some aileron input for the aircraft to be rolling like that. Now, we've got a whole heap of speed here, so we'll actually use that to just pick up our altitude again. Now the thing, the flight control I think PMDG has done really, really well is pitch. I can believe this aircraft would be sensitive in pitch. And by sensitive I mean the control input to actually, the displacement of the stick versus your attitude that you see out the window. I can believe it would need small I can believe it would need small stick displacement to actually see a pitch change. And that's all to do with center of gravity right now. The center of gravity of the aircraft as we stand right now is, well, it's just straight over the CG, right? There's just fuel in the wings. There's no fuel in the ox tanks, and so I can believe that would be fairly pitch sensitive. I can believe it can be fairly pitch sensitive, and that's all just to, again, moment arms and stuff like that, right? If the center of gravity is here, and this is where we're invoking our our center of gravity is here, and this is where our pitch moment comes from. Here and here, there's a long moment arm out there, so you'd expect the pitch moment to be quite sensitive. When the CG moves, well, I haven't done any CG testing, so I haven't tested for a forward CG and I haven't tested for an aft CG. Aft CG would be interesting to test, but I haven't done it yet. I don't even know if you can set CG in this thing. I probably could by just adding, that's the lower cargo hold. Yeah, I can't even set a CG here. Maybe I can set it actually in the X-plane stock. I'll revisit that another time. Okay, so that's roll. I think pitch is done really well. I can believe the pitch. I can also believe the control heaviness. The heaviness of the controls has been done very well. It feels like a big, heavy aircraft. However, the neutral stability around the lateral axis, the neutral stability in roll is wrong. And it's wrong due to aerodynamics. It's not due to an opinion. I wish I had a chance. I've never... let me preface all of this. I've never flown a DC-6. I've never flown a DC-6. But I have flown quite a few aircraft, and I've never met an aircraft with dihedral that doesn't have a natural tendency, a dynamic stability around the lateral axis. I've never met one. It's aerodynamics. And I mean, if we wanted to do a full test of it, we'll bring power back to idle, just to completely get rid of the whole thrust idea is holding the angular bank. Well, it's not. Hands are off the controls. The aircraft is in an angular bank. We're descending. With zero thrust, there is no residual torque there. That is holding a wing up or down. I'm just going to abuse the engines here for a second, and we'll just climb a bit. The next problem is rudder. I'm at 6,000 feet at 160 knots. We'll do what is probably most well known in the aviation world as the DC-6 barrel roll from rudder. And what we'll do here is we'll just come down the hill here a bit. We'll drop down to about 6,000 feet with a little bit of airspeed. And we'll do an entire barrel roll just with rudder. Overboosting can cause engine damage. I know. It's okay. Airplane. We'll keep coming down the hill. It feels like with the rudder thing, I know this is a little bit silly, but it feels like there is no aerodynamic load modelled on the actual fuselage of the aircraft, because I should not be able to do this in any way, shape or form, ever. Full left rudder, here comes the roll coupling, and over we go. Again, no aileron is being input here. Look at the control column, all to do with pedals, and we'll complete the barrel roll with just a little aft stick on the bottom side, reduce that rudder, Beautiful. That is a beautiful military barrel roll. I don't think any side load is being modelled on the side of the aircraft. I'm going to show this on the external. Oh, wow. So we just put the aircraft into a inverted flat spin, also commonly well known, but I want to see that from the outside. That's going to look pretty silly. Yes. So I don't think there is any. I don't think there's any side load or any. I'll bring the power back here so we don't go V and E again. Now I know someone's going to say, well, that's outside the envelope that the aircraft is meant to be used for. Well, is it? If I can push full rudder deflection and the aircraft goes into a barrel roll and then we'll go into an inverted flat spin like it did just there, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Okay, here we go. Let's have a look on the outside. I don't think there's any side load being modelled on the aircraft, because when you push an aircraft through the air sideways, I'll pause it. Oh, no, that was at the top of the climb, right? We'll just speed it up a bit here, sorry guys. Yeah, so no operating the aircraft outside of its known flight envelope, but right here is the problem. So yes, my nose is pointing in this direction, the nose of the aircraft is pointing in this direction. Where is the relative airflow coming from right now? The relative airflow is coming at the aircraft like this. I am presenting, can I be back inside here? Yes. I am presenting a side load. This is literally the direction the aircraft is traveling right now. All of this is being presented to airflow in this direction. And in fact, look how much of the tail right now in this particular place is being presented to airflow. The aircraft pivots around the center of gravity, right? So here's the center of gravity. So there is a longer moment arm after the center of gravity versus forward. Because of that, there is, oh, we'll go back one more, there is all of this surface area, all of this vertical area being presented to a airflow in this direction, which should give a tendency for the tail to actually stop swinging this far out. There should be a tendency for the tail, aerodynamic loading, right? The fuselage should be offsetting the load from the rudder, because let's have a look how big the rudder is. This is how big the rudder is. This is how big the rudder is. And that rudder should not be more, should have enough power to push an aircraft this size at 180 knots through the air sideways. There should be a limit here. But anyway, let's just watch a barrel roll, because who doesn't like a good barrel roll? Again, no aileron. Yes, I know there is a coupling of rudder and roll. There is, I know. But the aircraft should never get into this state. It should never get into this state. And now we'll show the inverted flat spin, which is just done by rocking the rudder back and forward here. I think this will just show that there is just literally no fuselage. Oh yes. Here comes the inverted flat spin. Easy. Just like that. Out the other side and fly away. So, I don't know whether this is an X-planism, but when you push this much of an aircraft sideways through the air, again, this is all because pivots around center of gravity here. When you put this much of a fuselage and vertical stabilizer through the air sideways, there should be a limit. There should be a limit to how much sideways the aircraft can get. And this wing should not come over the top. That wing should definitely, should not come over the top. I shouldn't have had that beer with dinner. That shouldn't happen, but it does. This with rudder. I think we've seen enough. The props, the props I feel absorb the right amount of power. I feel the engines make the right amount of power. I don't like how they're modelled on the ground, and I don't like how they're modelled in other things. Again, just another look at the lift, blah, 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 blah. But we've seen things that should not be possible. And I understand this is a simulator. You would never do that in real life, and it's hard to quantify something that you would never do in real life. Oh, can a DC-6 really do a barrel roll from the rudder? Well, maybe it could. But I think when you put things against the scale of percentage chance of likelihood, I don't think it's very likely. And I don't think it would go into an inverted flat spin either after bringing the rudder left to right. Because I think what would really happen is the rudder would lose it. The rudder would not be effective enough to push the aircraft sideways through the air. The aerodynamic loading on the side of the fuselage would end up getting the aircraft to a steady point where it would just be flying along in a crab. Just like as if there was a crosswind and you're flying across the ground, the aircraft would go into a little bit of a crab with a slight roll up or down because you have full rudder deflection, but we would not be doing barrel rolls in a DC-6. Like I said, I think the flight control that they have got right, the flight control that is correct, is pitch. I really like how it feels in pitch. It's just roll, I don't. Roll, I don't. I'm not going to show landing the aircraft. I don't think there's any real point. The aircraft lands, it has wheels, right? What more do you need to know? There's nothing really in the landing stage. The aircraft decelerates okay. I feel, though, at higher airspeeds, up around here, and at higher pitch angles, high angles of attack, I don't think it bleeds speed enough. Again, I've said a lot of stuff that I can't quantify, but I hope I've said enough that I can quantify. But I believe at high angles of attack, this aircraft should bleed speed a lot faster than what it does. Put the aircraft in the nose down, go to 240 knots, pitch up to about 10 degrees nose up, and the speed bleeds back slowly. Compare that to how you take off, and I mean, where you're watching every knot of airspeed that you gain, it just doesn't quite seem to make sense, especially when you start thinking about drag and stuff like that. We will continue flying the aircraft as we talk about, as we close up this video here. The thing is, I really want to love this aircraft. I really want to love it. I want the aircraft to be quirky. I want it to be hard to fly. I want it to be cantankerous. I want it to be... I want to feel invigorated when I'm done, when I'm finished flying it. I want to feel like I achieved something. I got the aircraft off the ground. It's an achievement to get one of these engines started. I don't feel that. I don't feel that right now. And I said it in one of my streams. It doesn't feel like the aircraft has a heart or a soul. It feels like it's... Like right now, I'm talking and waving my hands around, and the aircraft is just banking at 30 degrees. It just doesn't feel like it has a heart. It doesn't feel... It feels like a simulation. Other PMDG products, I don't think I can say the same thing. You fly the NGX 737 on P3D or X-Plane. Even though it's a computer model and all these other things, that aircraft you feel like you're engaged. You're engaged with flying a 737. This aircraft, I don't feel engaged. I don't. Like, I'm waving my arms around. I'm looking at a book that has a cat on it right now. I can be doing anything other than flying this aircraft. And it's the same thing when I start the engines. When I start the engines, I could be looking at an oxygen regulator, and as long as I have the levers in the right place, the engine will start. That's not right. That's not what I expect from a PMDG product. And it's not what we've come, as other people have come to expect from a PMDG product, right? They're 777, they're 73. They are pillars of the simulation world, to throw a word out there. They are. This aircraft, however, is not. And it's not now, maybe it will be in the future, but as it stands right now, it is not. There are a few other things that I've missed out. Sorry to go back to the bad things. The sounds, like, I mean, the videos that I all saw on YouTube, I mean, like, can we be honest and just say, like, let us know that either tell us either if a sound pack is coming out, or tell us that you edited the video with the sound pack from an engine, or you dubbed it or something. But the sounds of this aircraft are broken. They're not good. It doesn't sound like a DC. It doesn't sound like 4 R2800s on my wing. I'm disappointed that that happened, but hey, it happens, okay? I mean, Dovetail Sims, right? They did a pre-rendered video, and everyone knew it. I still bought their game. I did get a refund on Steam, but I still bought their game to give it a test fly. The sounds, they're broken. When I watch the aircraft in replay mode, whether I'm on an airport 20 nautical miles away or under the aircraft, the sound is exactly the same. They need work. These are things I can, the sound I can accept. The sound being a little bit broken, I can accept as being something in development. But I can accept it being in development. I can accept that because the sound is adding sounds and complex to moving parts. I understand it's a complex part of developing the aircraft. But yeah, I don't like that the nature that the videos, the sound was different. I don't like that. But hey, I have to accept it for being a commercial business, and that's what they do, right there. That's what a commercial business can do. And there were no claims that that was going to be the sound that we'll get. So I'm only sort of making myself feel a little underwhelmed from what I received. But again, I really want to love this aircraft. I really do. But there's no there's passion in the stuff that's being built, but there's no passion in the flight model. There's nothing in this aircraft that makes me want to come back for more. There's nothing like, yes, I want to really learn how to manage those engines. I overboosted the engine there for a bit. I can see, yeah, they're all yellow, but this is what I mean. I can fix the engines in flight, right? How cool is that? Sweet, done. That pretty much summarizes what I mean by there being no heart, no soul. There's no disadvantage of running my engines overboost. I can just run them overboost if I want, let them damage, and just sit here and do this. I mean, that's not what people are going to do, I understand. But I expected to be engaged by the flight model. I expected to be wowed or something. I don't know. Whatever it is the first option, blah, 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 blah. I get that, but I expected to be engrossed in the DC-6. I expected to feel like I expected to smell the oil on my hands while I was flying this thing. And I don't get that. I don't get that, and I think that's probably where the core of the problem comes from. And I get talking about the roll. I haven't touched it. My joystick is off to the side of the desk right now. The aircraft's just trucking along, doing its own thing. With all of that being said, it is a beautiful 3D model. There are some little gaps, like here, if I just pause the sim, there are some gaps in like right here. You can actually see through the aircraft, and there are some gaps in the actual texturing. I think there's even some under the aircraft. Yeah, there we go. We can actually see sky here, right? You can literally see the sky. Literally see the sky through the aircraft. So there are some issues with the texturing. But again, texturing I can deal with. I think texturing, everyone can deal with it. It's work in progress. When you're flying the aircraft, then you don't really care about it. But yeah, those things I can forgive. The sound, it can be developed. The texturing, it can be developed. Those things can be developed along the along why the aircraft is out there. But having the flight model like this just so wrong, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed, and then maybe we'll talk again about how good the aircraft is. But right now, I don't see it being good value for money. I don't think it is. I think it might be one day. But as it stands right now, it's not. It's not a good flight model. The engine model is missing. Or needs work, and yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I hope I've covered enough. This has probably been quite a long video. I was actually only saying I was going to do a 30-minute video, and It's probably going to be an hour and a half, so sorry for you guys that had to sit there and listen to it all, but I wanted to be thorough. I wanted to go over the things that I wanted to go over and explain them and justify them. I didn't just want to be ranting away like I do on my stream. So I hope this is valuable to someone. I hope this is valuable to everyone. You can put your finger on something that's wrong and actually take it away and either fix it or understand why it's broken, and we can move from there. So anyway, I think I'll cut this video where it is right now, and I'm going to go ahead and stream away on my little streamy stream and probably drink a fine whiskey. So thank you for watching. I hope this was valuable to someone. I hope it's valuable to either someone that's looking at purchasing the aircraft or a developer or someone. I don't care. I just hope it's valuable for someone. And maybe even learned something along the way with dihedral and things like that, and the engines as well. I hope it was worthwhile. So I don't want to show the aircraft in a negative light. I just want to show it for what it is. And I hope I've shown it for what it is. I really do. There are things that are bad, there are things that are good, but right now the bad overshadows the good, and that should change. That will change. I have no doubt about it. PMDG has the resources, they have the manpower, they have the people doing it, they have the world's best beta testers, and I think it will turn out to be a good product. So yes, I hope this was helpful, and have a good evening, or day, or afternoon, or morning, wherever the hell you are in the world, and we'll chat to you soon.